This is the Big Fish Cares Podcast. Big Fish Cares Podcast. And here's your host, Benny Fisher.
Got an amazing guest today for you folks. And I think the one of the coolest ways that we've kind of connected, I've just gotten to know this gentleman over the last few months, really. He's a legend in the roofing industry. But we're not going to talk that much about roofing today. My friend, Mike Goldenstein, is with us today. How you doing, Mike?
Hey, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on.
I met Mike in a contractor fellowship group that we do on Wednesdays. Wednesday mornings, a bunch of contractors get together, and we talk about how our different views of Christianity and how we take different things and how we apply them to our life. And I think it's been really interesting. Mike, you want to shed a little bit of light about what that group does?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we've got a lot of guys who are entrepreneurs. They might be contractors. They might be people who are interested in contracting, or coaches, or weather guys. I mean, we get a whole group of different guys that talk about how faith interacts with their businesses. And when you have a bunch of type A and driven people who tend to railroad other people, sometimes we have to stop, talk about a little bit of you know, what God wants us to be rather than what we feel like we should be. And it's a great time to just put the brakes on for an hour and reconnect with guys on a different level and reconnect with God. I really enjoy it, and I've been doing it about a year and a half, and it's been a pleasure getting to know you through that as well.
Yeah, no, it's been awesome. It definitely is like that cool, like, reminds me when I was a young kid when my mom made me go to Wednesday night church, and now I stopped going to Wednesday night church. I don't even know if my church even offers it over here in Pittsburgh. They probably do. But yeah, because of busy lives and everything like that, it's like I just go on Sunday mornings now. I used to go Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. But this group on Wednesday mornings, it's nice because it reminds me of basically just going to like church on Wednesday night, where it's a little bit more low key, it's a little bit more mellow, and it's really conversational. And I think it's we get a lot of guys, a lot of big, tough guys opening up, being vulnerable, and it's really good to share. So if you're interested in joining that group, DM me on Instagram or Facebook, and I'll get you a special link. Or you can also message Mike on Facebook, and we'll definitely get you into that group. But let's get to know Mike a little bit. Mike, tell us about where you were born, where you came from. Tell us a little bit about the origins of Mike Goldenstein.
Yeah, so I was born early 70s, 1974, and I was actually adopted shortly after, and grew up on a farm, on a hog farm, in the middle of nowhere, Iowa. It was about 20 minutes to the nearest stoplight, and that was just a flashing red. It was about an hour drive to the nearest McDonald's where I grew up. And it's not the cool part of Iowa. There's some. It's Eastern Iowa can get pretty, very, very beautiful. I was in the really flat, boring part of Iowa where you could watch your dog run away for 2 weeks. And it was great. And, you know, grew up on a farm and working, you know, long hours since the time I could walk. Learned to drive a skid steer at the age of 5. So
you're like your ideal, typical farmer, like, and then growing up like on a farm. Like my mom grew up on a farm. My mom, my uncle, and then they moved away from that farm life, and everybody went to the suburbs eventually. But they tell us
wrestling
stories,
and football.
Right?
So you're Pennsylvania. You got a lot of wrestling and football. Ours, you know, wrestling and football is the lifeblood of northern Iowa, certainly most of Iowa, and specifically back then. So yeah, that was kind of my life growing up. And as soon as I graduated, 1992, I went off and started roofing. And 30 years later, here I am, still in the industry. So you call it legendary, I just call it old.
Yeah, well, I mean, here's the thing. But to be consistent at something, and you know, especially in this day and age, where people just hop around as soon as they get punched in the face, or as soon as they get knocked down, they're like, "Oh, that's not for me," and they go try something different. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it does show something about your character and your ability to be consistent, to stay in the same industry. I know you've had a couple different roles and a couple different positions. We can get into that, but I'm really curious. When you said you were adopted, Did you know that right away? Like, you always the only thing I know about adoptions is the stuff that I really see like on movies or TV, the ones where like, sometimes the parents don't ever tell you. And then sometimes that you find out like when you're older and you get mad at your new parents and then you're sad about your birth parents. Can you tell us a little bit about those feelings and those emotions and how it went for you as a child?
Yeah, and in Iowa, there's very closed adoptions back then, so it was under lock and key. You really couldn't find out anything about it. So growing up, as soon as I was old enough to know what it was, my mom was pretty specific about telling me. And so my brother, I've got an older brother, a year and a half older. He was also adopted, and we both knew it early on. I remember going to kindergarten. And one of the kids on the bus was asking him, and my brother and I, somehow that came up in the conversation, which how does it come up with a kindergarten? But it did. And I remember the kid going home and we got a call from his mom. He was crying, thinking that we were going to die. He had no idea what adopted meant, but he was sure that it meant that we were going to die soon.
Wait, let me backtrack. Your brother, is this your biological brother that were adopted by the same parents, or a brother that you adopted into the family with?
No, both were adopted from completely different places. So we are almost
okay. So your parents, when they adopted you, they also adopted another boy.
Yep.
Okay, and then that's why you guys are brothers. All right, cool. All right.
Yeah, Mike and Matt, and we fought all the time. When I go back home and go to family reunions, and oh man, look at you've all grown up, man. You guys fought all the time. I mean, we were.
So it has nothing to do with blood. So it just has all to do with like being in the home together.
Yeah. Just beat the snot out of each other. That's all we did.
So how old were you when your parents told you? You said you were what? You said 5?
Yeah, from as long as I remember. I mean, I always knew that I was adopted, and what I didn't really know, I kind of knew just stories. I think my parents, or I thought growing up that my parents were in high school. I think like junior, senior year, and my mom had gotten pregnant, and then. I thought there was a little bit of a time gap from when I was born to when I was placed in adoption, but it wasn't very long, just a month or two or something like that.
Oh, wow.
So that's kind of how I grew up. I thought about it a lot. It's one of those things where you always kind of wonder, am I going to meet my parents someday? Am I going to know who they are? Or did they just die in a car accident last week? Or, did they end up getting married? And, you do. I mean, that stuff never leaves you from...
Yeah, did they have more kids that they ended up like keeping? You know what I mean? Did they have more kids that they adopted? They gave up for adoption? Like, there's all kinds of questions, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And you think about it, but I didn't dwell on it necessarily. I had plenty of other things to keep me busy, and
well, your dad had you out there working, man.
Oh yeah. Oh man. I mean, walking beans and baling hay and picking up rocks. There was, and even at those days, I look back at it now, and as before I had a license, I had a business. A lot of the farmers in the area would take the people that I had put together, or that my neighbors would put together, and I was always part of a crew, and they would hire us, and we would work all summer, and then every holiday, every single chance we can. I remember the first day I got paid $4 an hour. It was amazing money. I had so much more money than all my friends.
Yeah, man, that's pretty good. I remember when I graduated high school, it was 99. I think I was making like $5.15 an hour at the grocery store. And because I was in high school, I had more money than any of my friends in high school because they weren't working. So like, $100, I was like rich.
Oh man. I bought my first car.
It took me 20 hours to make $100.
Yeah. I bought my first car. I didn't even have my license yet. And I remember I paid like $3,500 for it. It was a sweet car. And I loved it. I was one of the few people in the school that even had a car, and I bought it my own, and it was awesome. But I was always a saver. I worked hard, and then I saved my money, and then put it all into a car, and experienced my freedom that way. It was fantastic.
We're going to have to talk about the car story in a little bit. The one that I just saw you with your son. You did have a little escapade that you went down to D.C.
Yes.
and got a car. Might as well just talk about it now. Let's just talk about it now. So I'm friends with Mike on Facebook. I'm following him. Next thing you know, there's a post where he says, well, my son's going to make a stupid decision, and he's going to go out and he's going to try to buy some car off some guy online that has no business getting, and I have no idea if it's going to, it's going to be a stupid decision. Well, no sense in one stupid decision leading to another stupid decision. So I met him at the airport, and you just showed up and surprised your son at the airport. Can you talk to us a little bit about that whole situation? Because that was hilarious.
Yeah, I mean, what bank out there decides to loan a 21-year-old boy, $20,000 to buy a sports car that's barely road legal? I mean, this thing, driving it home, and I'm going to say this carefully, but the thing, and when you're in sixth gear and just cruising, you have to be at 90. If you're not going 90, the RPMs are just not high enough to keep the thing going. So my wife and I were like, no, we're not going to support this in any way, but he's 21, what are we going to do? I woke up because I did commit to taking him to the airport. So I woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I had to get him to the airport because he was flying from Minnesota to Washington, D.C. to pick this thing up, sight unseen. And I'm thinking, this is the dumbest thing I've ever done. And but I couldn't remember what time he had to be at the airport. And so I looked, and the only way I knew, I opened up the Delta app, and I looked into what time the morning flights were. And I noticed that the one-way tickets out there were the same price as what I helped him, when I was choosing it a couple weeks earlier. And so I asked my wife, I said, should I just go with him? And she's like, I don't care. We don't have nothing else to do that weekend. So I bought a one-way ticket, and I didn't tell my son. I still yapped at him. As a dad, I mean, I'm yapping at him all the way down how dumb of a decision this is. Don't call me when you get to halfway back and the thing is a lemon and you can't even get it back. And I dropped him off at the gate, at the drop-off spot, circled around the airport, parked the car, and then surprised him at the gate and recorded it. And it was a fantastic look on his face, and we had a blast. I still don't support his decision, but we had an absolute blast coming home. Driving
that's a great father-son bonding experience. I mean, is the car, you think the car is worth it? You think it's going to be all right? You think we're going to, is this like an everyday driver for him, or is this something he's just going to play with? Or?
Well, this is the best part. So we're going 1,200 miles, an 18-hour drive. He does work at a shop. He lifted it up on the hoist, and he's like, this thing is not road ready. He made me bring another vehicle because it was unsafe for the road. The brakes were just shot. It was completely done wrong, and we were about ready to fall apart. So he didn't even feel safe driving it home, 5 minutes to where he was living. So, but yeah, I think he will drive it. Well, it's an STI, so it's like an all-wheel drive sports car. And he's been rebuilding engines and rebuilding Audis and BMWs has kind of been his thing since before he had a license. And I don't know anything. I don't know how to change a muffler belt. I don't know how to check blinker fluid. I don't know anything about cars, but this kid has been teaching himself on YouTube how to rebuild engines. He'll go to the junkyard, he'll rebuild an engine, and he'll race it until he kills it. And then he'll figure out a way to sell it or get rid of it, and he'll buy another one and rebuild it. He's been doing this for 7 years now. So this was kind of his dream car. He wants to build it up, and then he does a lot of autocross, and now he wants to do this one with motocross, which is kind of the off-road version of it. So he's got an off-road sports car that as soon as it snows, he's going to put it away. At least that's what he says. I don't believe him. I think he's going to
be doing donuts.
As much as he wants.
I think he's going to be doing donuts in the freezing Minnesota weather.
100%.
Does he still live at home?
No, he doesn't. He moved out. So he was a merit scholar.
It's a lot easier to do that stuff when you don't live at home anymore.
Right. So he was a merit scholar. He went to college for a few years down in Texas and then COVID hit, and COVID was not kind to him, so he moved back to Minnesota. He lived with us for about 6 months, and then he found he's living with about 15 minutes away or something like that. He got a job, and he's living with a couple of buddies in a house, and so I've got 4 oldest kids. So I've got he's going to be 21. He's going to be 22 here shortly. I've got a 20, an 18, one that's going to be 16 in about 4 months, and then a 6-year-old. So I've got 5 kids total, and they're all just crazy talented. So much fun. I got to go listen to 2 more that are in orchestra today. 3 of those, the middle 3, are actually musical, and I have no idea how, because I am not musical at all. My wife kind of is, but not really. But
okay, well, I mean, hey, listen, somehow they got the gene somehow.
Somehow.
You sent me a video, and I didn't know this about you. You sent me a video, and I saw this really cool video where you were like on the news, and they were talking about how you guys are foster parents and you adopt, and like, can you tell us a little bit about that whole journey and how it ties into your childhood and kind of make some correlations there?
Yeah, so my wife's passion really has been as a mom, and her desire was really to start doing some foster care. I was over the road sales from about 2010 to 2013. We kind of started the process and then we quit because I was gone all the time. But then in 2013, I got promoted to being in Twin Cities, and that's when we started fostering kids. From about 2013 to now, probably had about 40 kids come into our home. And one of them stuck. And it's one of those few it was a weird story. I'll always remember it. And because I wasn't home very often, but when I was, I took a call from the county. That's all done through the county. And they said, we have a child that was born, a little baby boy was born. He had methamphetamines in his system. He was being removed from his mom. And can you take him in? But they said, this is going to be 72 hours. And we found out later on the reason why they were so sure about that is because he was 100% Native American in him. And there's a whole different level of, laws.
Yeah, rules and stuff, probably.
Rules and regulations for that kind of stuff. So I did. I called my wife and said, hey, can we take a newborn? And she said, sure. Because, every time you get a newborn, then you got to figure out, well, do we have a car seat? Do we have a crib? Do we have everything that we need for this? And she said, sure. And I said, good, because I already said yes.
I'm sure that's not the first time that happened.
Right. Well, but it's always been a passion of hers, and the little guy stayed with us for those 72 hours. That turned in 2 weeks. That turned in about 2 years. We worked with the birth mom for unification. She was starting to get kind of close, but ended up, the drug addiction is a hard thing. And after about 2.5 years, she said, yeah, we want you to be the parents. And so we adopted him on National Adoption Day in November, about 4 years ago. So he is 6.5 now. All
right. And, how's he acclimated with the I'm sure the rest of your kids just love him to death, right? Like,
yeah, that's a good it is an interesting question to me, because I was always nervous about this. When we started doing this, the kids were a little bit younger, 8 to about 15, 16.
Oh, they have no filters at 8 years old. I have an 8-year-old. I have an 8-year-old right now.
Right. But think about it, though. Yeah, and the world revolves around them, right?
Right, yeah.
And so that was what we were nervous about, bringing infants and newborns in there. And especially as we start getting attached, if that's, dragging out to 3 months, 6 months, or a year, we're all getting attached. But who does everyone want to hold? They want to hold the baby. They want to play with the baby. They want
to,
all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So we were nervous about what that was going to do with our kids. And I was so excited to see for them to watch, for me to watch them, their lives now revolving around somebody else other than themselves. And it got to the point where, as kids were coming and going, if we didn't have a kid, they were all, at the dinner table or
they're like jonesing. They're like shaking. They're like,
they're like, we're going to get another one. When are we going to get another one? And, they were cheering when the phone would ring. And, we're going to get another one? So.
Oh, that's so cool.
I could see that going the other way. I could see them. You guys only, you only pay attention to the new baby.
I think if they're younger. So now that you tell me that, so you always it was more of a newborn thing that you guys would mostly adopt?
We were licensed. Yeah, we licensed. I think we licensed ourselves from 0 to 5 years, because we didn't want them to have an age spread between them and the youngest. But primarily they came in 0 to 3. Okay. Usually.
So I will tell you that. I mean, with my 8-year-old and then the newborn, I mean, like he's at first he was a hair nervous, and then as soon as he held her, he's like a dick. He's like hooked. He's like I want to hold the baby. I want to hold the baby. I want to hold the baby. And I'm like, all right, this is cool. This is kind of like that more like take care, protect. It's not about them. I think that's a great age gap. I think 4 or 5 or 3 or 4, like they don't understand at all. Like it's not even cool. They just want that attention. But that's interesting. So how hard is it to give them back?
Yeah, so let me tell you a story of this one. This was one of our first placements ever, actually. And so we had just started. I think we might have done just one that was a really short one, or even a weekend or something like that. And we were placed with the new little guy was just born. As the story goes, I think he was born in a toilet. Like, mom was already high and gave a home birth, which you're familiar with that. This was not
the Benny Fisher home birth.
No.
That was like
very
the,
different.
The setup and the tub inside the bedroom and like doulas and midwives and like lots of care.
Yep. So this little guy was born, but he had heroin in his system, so it took a while. I mean, he was in NICU for a long time, almost a month, I believe. His older sister turned 2 while she was in our home, and the dog was the only one that could even get a little bit of emotion out of her. So whatever baggage she had for the first 2 years of her life was pretty severe. She would walk around with a bottle in her mouth and she would grunt. That was about all. She wouldn't say a word. She was never happy, never sad. Most people looked at her and were like, wow, what a good kid, because it seemed like she was really compliant, but then you start looking deeper and like, no, she has zero emotion whatsoever. And we ended up having them for a year and a half. And every month, especially towards the end, my wife and I remember we'd look at her and, she had a light in her eye and she would smile and she would giggle and she would laugh and she would play. And every month we're like, man, this is the real her. And then, oh man, no, this is the real her. And at that point we were really starting to see that the mom and dad are not going to kick their drug habit. And so they were looking for permanency at that point. And it was one of those strange things. I think that my wife and I both looked at each other and it's like, we're open to it, right? I mean, they've been in our house for a year and a half. They are part of our family. I mean, this is my son. This is my daughter. But we didn't feel like God was calling us to be their parents permanently. And so we said, no, keep looking. And sure enough, they found somebody. And after a year and a half, it was like giving your own kids up for adoption. Whew. And it was a excruciatingly grieving process for all, our kids, for us. And it seemed like even 2 to 3 months later, because it was right about Christmas, like the week before Christmas, then they were placed in this home. And 6 months later, I got to tell you the story because this is the beauty of foster care. And this is why it's so important that if you're ever going to do foster care, that if you have the heart to say, oh yeah, I could do that, because I don't think I would really get that connected and I'd be able to have kids come and go. Foster care is probably not for you, because you have to connect. You have to connect with these kids. You have to be their dad. You have to be their mom, brothers and sisters, because it was as hard as it was at Christmas time being without them. We went to go see them in June, July, I think. It was actually, I think it was July. And this was my little guy. I mean, if you'd have seen Booger, I call him Booger and Snot. That's probably not very good, but they were Booger and Snot.
That's right. No one from the county's listening. So
right. So my little Booger comes running out of the house because we had gone and we were meeting with the adoptive parents and we were walking towards the house, and he comes running out of the house like he had a million times before, and he comes running straight at me, and I was like, oh, these memories and these emotions, and he ran right by me. He had no idea who I was. And he jumped into his dad's arms. And I was crushed. And at the same time, I was so excited because if you're in this world of foster care and raising kids, you understand that when the brain forms under a loving and a caring home and a place of comfort, it can be really hard to detach, but then they can reattach. The problem is, and what happens in foster care, when there's no attachment in those younger years, it's really hard for those to come back. So it's so important to be connecting with kids, and that whether they're your own kids or somebody that you're watching, whatever, that connection, once it's made the first time, the brain recognizes that and they can do it again. If he was going from home to home to home to home to home those first 18 months, he would have never been able to. Well, I shouldn't say we'll never be able to, but it's very, very difficult for that brain to connect later in life if they don't early in life. So
you're saying 0 to 18 months is a really important time to bond and have that connection, and you could connect and they could connect with the same person, and they can connect again 3 years later. They can connect 3 years later. But if they keep getting passed around the first 18 months, it's a lot harder. Is that what I heard?
They may never get it back. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, because that brain formation is done in those first 2 to 3 years. And if you don't get that time, you may never get that back. So
how often for dads, especially dads that work a lot and that travel and, talking about me right now. So
right. I
need somebody. So how often do I need to spend with my infant to make sure that there's an attachment to me and not just mom? Any like words on that? Any like advice? Like, what did you do? Because obviously, you got some healthy kids. You've had some healthy foster kids come through. How often are you spending, like, if you're just holding the baby, just you and the baby?
Oh, I was a sucker for that. Every time I wanted to. But again, I was gone a lot. And even when I was, back to my job, even when I was home for the Twin City Metro, I was home every night. Sometimes I wasn't home. I would be gone. Right. Yeah. No, that's what I'm saying. Like, I'm home. Like, I'm home right now, but like, I'm not like actually as present as I should be. Right. It doesn't take much. So the short answer is it doesn't take much. It's minutes a day.
Good.
Is sometimes all it takes. But obviously the more time, they say the quality time is the important thing, but the quality time only comes from quantity time. So the more time you can do it, the better it'll end up being. Good. And if you're and it's weird because if you've got the kid in your hand, the infant in your one hand and you're on the phone with the other,
doesn't count.
It does. It's weird. I don't know how the kid knows, but it doesn't. So.
Well, that's what I mean. Like, kids nowadays, I feel like my 8-year-old, he's only ever seen me with my phone in my hand. I feel like it's like part of my, it's like part of my hand. Like, it's like, it's kind of a weird thing. I saw an artist one time. He took a picture or something, and he basically like embellished like everyone and their phones out, and like he just made everything like their hands look like iPhones, and like it was just really like, wow, like we're like stuck in this world of like being connected to our phone all the time. Like we can't go anywhere without it because like we're addicted to the community and the connection of our phone, because like humans crave connection, and I feel like that connection that you get artificially through a phone has now taken over.
Yeah, and that's where, if we go full circle, my being gone and even my wife can see this in me, that I'm more addicted to, the phone or the website or social media and my friends. Those aren't my friends, and that's one of the things. As much as I love Contractor Fellowship, I love that hour. I love that hour, but it does not take the place of the local church. Never should it. And anybody who wants to connect with me, I would love to have you on Contractor Fellowship. It is a fantastic hour with some of the greatest people on the planet. It does not take the place of a local church, nor does my friends that are my Facebook friends, the ones that I see at these events, the ones that I truly believe are some of the closest people that I am to. This is a really struggle. This is a struggle with my wife as she looks at me and goes, those aren't your friends. Well, they are, but they're not, right?
Yeah. We're Facebook friends. We're Facebook friends. Yeah,
I know.
Yeah, I know. Facebook friends. It's like a new friend zone. They're strong acquaintances.
Yeah, but it makes a difference too. Like if I'm hanging out with them and my wife doesn't know them, it's important for couples to have similar friends. Because
did you go on the couples thing?
She did. So we went to.
So you guys Contractor Fellowship. A bunch of the guys and a bunch of their ladies got together. I wasn't able to go because I had another conference to go to. But tell us a little bit about that experience.
Yeah. So my wife got to meet my social media friends.
I can't believe you let her meet them.
Oh my gosh, it was great. And she got to learn that Reggie Brock is actually 7 years old.
And he's a real person, right? He's not just somebody you talk about at the house and be like, oh man, like this. Yeah, that's funny because Brittany met Reggie. We were in Indianapolis doing a conference, and I was like, man, can you believe this guy? Like, this is a real human being, man.
Right. It was fantastic, though. We flew into Nashville. We got to experience Broadway, which was like it's Broadway, right?
Yeah.
I don't know, the strip in Nashville.
I think it's Yeah, Broadway.
It was like, my wife was like, get me out of here. It was like, that wasn't it. But we drove about an hour and a half east of there. It was absolutely gorgeous. Played a little bit of golf, hung out, and it was just couples and sharing about where we're at with couples, and just fantastic. It was so much fun, and good time to hang out with people that are like-minded and have similar struggles and successes in their lives.
Does your wife still think that they're just social media friends now? Or does she give them an ounce of credibility now because she's actually met them in the flesh and they're not just figments of your imagination that you talk about at home?
It was fun to see people who genuinely care, and I think that's the part of it that you typically can miss if you're just Facebook friends or just at the shows and you just see them every once in a while. She saw a part of that group that genuinely cared about her and genuinely cared about me and us together as a couple. So yeah, it was something that was very helpful. And I think I'll get her to do it again.
How did you and your wife, going through, how long have you guys been married? You've been married for a while, it sounds like.
25 years.
So how did you guys, when you first decided to adopt, first you had 4 of your own kids, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So first you have 4 of your own kids. That's a whole thing in and of itself, right? And then you started doing the adoption thing, or not the adoption, the foster care. Really, it's a foster care, right? And they're coming and going, right? You're talking 2, 3, 4 months at a time is usually the average time that they're in there.
Yeah. Yeah, it could be. Yeah.
What was the first one like? What was the first one when you had to getting them? I'm sure is exciting, right? And then giving them back has got to be do you get to interview the new adopted parents, or do they ever go back to their existing parents?
Oh yeah. I mean so yeah, you had a couple of different questions there, but yeah, absolutely. Reunification is always the goal. Okay. And so that's always one of the things, and my wife was always fantastic about that, really wanting to get to know the biological parents, and we're always rooting for them. Sometimes it would, sometimes there was reunification and there was a huge celebration in that. And sometimes there wasn't, and there was a lot of sorrow in those. But you can, if you're not comfortable doing the foster care thing, because foster care comes with a complete unknown. You can have them for 72 hours. You could have them for a lifetime. You just don't know with foster care. But you can start small and what do they call it? Respite. You can do respite care. And those, you pick them up on Friday and you drop them off on Sunday. I mean, or, for a week. And what respite is usually help for foster parents who need a vacation or need a weekend off or something like that. And so it's kind of a nice way to get in. So we actually started with respite a couple times. I'll tell you what the sorrowful part of that one is the number of kids that we picked up from their parents at McDonald's and dropped them back off at McDonald's. We would literally show up at a McDonald's, we would sit in the parking lot, the parent would come in, and maybe they had to do jail time over the weekend. They would drop their kid off screaming, give them to us in a McDonald's parking lot, and we would drive off with their kid. It's hard on kids. Yeah. It's hard on us.
And these kids are always young, right? 0 to 3, right? This young kids. This is the zone that you're in, right? Yeah. So, and then you have to and especially when they get on I would say, even a little bit older, 2 to 3, they start talking back. Well,
think about it. They have no idea what's going on. Who are these people? It's and then we start talking about trauma, whether or not, there's different levels of trauma, but that affects the brain formations, and, trauma is trauma. It doesn't matter, what age it comes at, it can be pretty significant. So
how did you guys deal with that as a couple, right? You guys got your existing kids, you got these new kids, you guys, it's hard enough to be in a relationship without kids, right? And then how did you guys make that your relationship between each other, stand up and then always be there? Cause that's you got a lot going on, man.
It is. And
then you're working a lot.
I was working a lot, and I was working too much. And if anybody knows my story or starts to get to know my story, we could do a whole nother podcast about how much negligence I was giving to our marriage, to my family, because I wanted to be the legend. I wanted to be the legend. I wanted to be the best at what I did and how I did it. And thinking of new ways to do business and growing, the brand that I was working for, or my personal brand, or whatever it was. And meanwhile, my wife was just a rock through this whole thing, and her passion and her drive stayed steady. It was always for the kids, and just because I didn't ever say no, didn't necessarily mean that I sat down and we prayerfully considered this, and we decided as a couple to do this. And so I would say the hardest year of our married life was our 25th year. I mean, it's gotten to be where she was finally like, dude, I have been doing this by myself for 10 years. And so it took a lot of soul searching. And again, this is where, we'll talk about him again. I mean, I always remember the day that I met Reggie, in person, I just gushed. I'm like, dude, been married for 24 years. I'm hoping to make it 25th. And, starting to walk with, alongside of people who, are authentic and can open up and talk about, man, this is going to be painful, but you got to do it. If you want to do it, you got to do it. And you got to do it right. And, it saved our marriage, and we're still obviously working on it, but it's not easy. And so I want to make sure nobody thinks this is the Mike Goldenstein, roofing legend that's telling these stories. This is, Beth Goldenstein, who's a legend with foster care kids and making sure that children who need to be loved are loved. And she did that by herself a lot. And I carry the guilt of that today. But that's part of our story as well. I got to put it out there.
Yeah. I mean, I appreciate you sharing that, man. That's going to help inspire a lot of people to be better dads, better husbands. That's going to inspire a lot of people. So I appreciate you sharing that. And she is the legend. It sounds like we need to get her on the podcast. I want to hear how, she's got to run a tight ship at that house.
Oh man.
Yeah. I mean, that's gotta be
she doesn't miss a concert. She doesn't miss, a sports event. And, while dad's out running around and being a,
you get to be like a self-proclaimed, we get to be self-proclaimed, we have to we build that hero complex inside of us, right? To because we need that to kind of keep going and doing more. And we got to keep put everything on our back. The roofing industry is tough, man. I mean, there's a bunch of people that need our love too. And I feel and I know that, I feel like God's put both of us in the industry just probably on purpose, because I feel like a lot of people need to hear a different way of doing things. And I feel like, the guys that you've mentioned, some of the people that we hang out with, they're all trying to raise up the industry in a really different way. And I think it's really cool. And I think it's just beginning.
Yeah, we're watching the entire trend, and this is what I think you'll celebrate this as well. When you're looking at the roofing space today, I call it the first century fisherman, because when Jesus went out, he took the blue collar. People didn't really. I don't know that they really necessarily respected him, but they worked hard. They were passionate about what they were doing. And now it seems like there's a movement that's going through the roofing that looks a lot like that, right? And so you've got Storm into the New Era that's very different. You've got, Live Exposed. You've got all of these. You've got, Be Authentic or GTFO. I mean,
you got the Transform conference I just got back with.
Transform conference,
I mean, everyone's talking about it. We kind of use roofing as the way to get people there.
Yeah.
But when we get there, we don't even talk about roofing.
Right.
We're talking about, what can we do to be a better person? Who do we need to become to be a better leader?
Creating a culture at work, like an environment where people are fulfilled and because that you're building a business. It's not about you. It's not about putting money in your pocket, but think about the number of lives that you get to affect every single day and make their lives better. And sometimes we lose sight of that when all we're doing is hearing about scaling or hearing about Growth. Yeah. 10X.
Yeah. 10X.
You lose a part of yourself. And it seems like this industry is kind of starting to get that back, and I'm excited about it.
Yeah, it's something special. I mean, I'm glad I feel still young. I'm 41 years old. I get to try to make an impact. Before I was just trying to survive, as a business owner, trying to figure out my way. Because of systems, processes, because of guys like you and people that came before me in the industry that work for amazing corporations and have good leadership in place. I was able to learn a lot of different things and skills and then meet other people in the industry that really helped me level up. I can tell you that. So I always feel like almost kind of like I owe the roofing industry as much as I can give to help kind of further that cause. So who inspired you when you were coming up in the roofing industry? Because you probably know guys that were doing this 20 years ago silently, right? Now we're all got events and tickets and we're doing conferences. But who inspired you in the roofing industry back in the day that you can give a shout out to?
That's a great question for me, just because I think I have a pretty unique story in that, I just was doing it for a summer job to get through college. I had no idea, and I had no interest in doing this full time. Graduated with a Christian education degree, and my first job was, once I got married, I was like, I got to do something. So I kept roofing. I was installer, not the sexy kind of roofing that has some sales crews and just.
We got marketing engines behind us and stuff like that.
Right.
We make it look fun,
Yeah. For 18 years, I installed. I had 10 of those. I started my own company, but for the most part, I was still the primary installer. I had a crew. I would typically have a crew of anywhere from 5 to 8 or something like that. But I put in every nail in most of my roofs, and at that point, I hit 35, and my body would not recover anymore. And I've got to figure out what to do next, and that's where I knew that GAF was looking here locally for a rep, and so I put my name in the hat and did not get it. I actually didn't get the job, and I remember those days because I liked my job. I liked being self-employed. I liked being my own boss, but I remember that feeling of rejection and going, man, I think I'm really ready for a career change. And so I was kind of looking around at what I was going to do next, and I had been a youth pastor on and off, and that's kind of when I started my own company. It was because back in those days, this was early 90s and early 2000s, that nobody had a full-time youth ministry position back in those days. And so I started roofing on the side, and then the company outgrew my ability to do 2 jobs and with the kids coming and that kind of stuff. So when I didn't get the job at GAF, then about 6 months later, the decking division came. I don't know if you knew that GAF had a composite decking division back in the day.
Nope.
That was my foot in the door, and so that was 2010. So I spent 18 years as an installer in roofing, and then the last 12 years before just recently moving on.
Yeah, working for the world's #1 manufacturer in my book. I'm a GAF guy. And I'll tell a story that I don't think I've told anybody this. When I was working for my uncle, my uncle's a commercial roofer. We started doing some residential stuff, and that's how I kind of learned a little bit about residential. And that's when my first introduction to GAF, and it was through one of my Beacon reps. And, I love GAF so much from a support system, from a marketing side, from a cutting edge, leading technology. I loved everything I do. I love their website. I love their training portals. I mean, I was drinking the Kool-Aid at GAF, right? So much so that when my rep was transferring to another place and there was a job opening in the Pittsburgh market, I was like, man, I can't stand this roofing contracting business, man. I want to get out of this. I don't want to work for my uncle anymore. I dropped out of college. I had a terrible resume. I barely even knew anything about roofing. I just wanted a cool, nice, cushy job. And I'm thinking all right, I'll put my name in the hat. And I didn't get it either. And I'm so glad I didn't get it. Hindsight's 2020, but I'm thinking those are the little things in life. And I just remembered that I put my name, and I wasn't that serious about it. I kind of I just said, I filled out the application online, and through the grapevine, I heard that 58 people probably applied for that position. And, they definitely gave it to a much more qualified guy who's actually still there today. And he's actually my rep. And I met him, and it was like interesting to like, you know, and I never even told him because I didn't want to be like, oh yeah, I didn't get the job, because I didn't even want my uncle to know that I applied for the job.
Yeah,
because I was like, you know what, like if I can pull this off, man, I can get back into the corporate world, man. I can have me a nice cushy job again. My mom will be proud of me, right? Yeah. But yeah, I never told anybody about that, but I remember, I put my name in the hat, and
yeah, so I started with my uncle. My uncle was the one that got me into the industry, and I credit him with a ton. You know, really putting it in perspective, two things that he really taught me. Number one, working hard. I mean, we were up at before dark, you know, because it didn't matter. We were on the road doing these shingling salt domes around the country. So we were up before dawn, and we would work as far into the afternoon as we possibly could, and then we'd take lunch, and we'd take 2-3 hours for that, and then we would go back out and work until after dark. So I learned a lot of work ethic from him. But the other thing that he taught me was how to treat other people, because we were always on the road, and he would treat every single person with so much respect, and absolutely loved that. Grew so much. But by the time 2008 came, that was a huge storm year. I'd already been long since left my uncle's company, but had started my own. There was a huge storm that came through the Twin Cities. It was the most roofing I'd ever done in a year. It was the least amount of money I'd ever made for the year because of the price, and nobody was really doing exactly me. There was a few that were. Maybe it was just starting to get huge, but there was no place to go for that kind of information. And so by the time I started working for GAF, that kind of became my mission, is I want to be that guy that can help contractors be successful at that and not have the type of year that I had. So in other words, I sucked so bad as a contractor that I decided I wanted to get out of it and teach people how to roof. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I mean, listen, that's, because you're going to teach them all the things that you shouldn't do, right? Like,
yeah, so I got into... Yeah, so that's when I really started paying attention to storm restoration codes, compliance, really getting into, the stuff that nobody's going to teach you in college. Nobody's going to teach you inside the industry. And so once I started learning that stuff and really kind of trying to set myself and set my company apart with how we can help contractors build their business, and that's when everything really started taking off for me and for our company.
That's awesome. That's a great story. For me, it was like I was unemployable, and eventually, and my uncle taught me too the same exact principles, right? Worked super hard. He had that farm life, right? And I got away from kind of like working hard, through the corporate jobs in my 20s. I worked for car dealerships and stuff like that, and you can kind of hide and stuff like that, and that wasn't good for me, obviously. So he taught me that hard work ethic. And now I wasn't necessarily obviously a labor person all the time. Like every once in a while, like when no one would show up, I'd have to go up there and like tear off flat roofs and stuff. But I would be up at 4 a.m, and have to go run and pick up something and take it to another job site. And then I wouldn't, sometimes if, we were doing commercial roofing downtown at night, sometimes I'd have to be down there to run traffic and like, set up, dumpsters and cranes and like block off roads. And, I got a little rush out of that, downtown Pittsburgh, working with the police downstate, anything's better than being up on the roof. Let me just tell you that. So like I like that part of it. And then the treating people, right? I look back, and sometimes it's nice to have these conversations because then I can reflect a little bit. But he always took care of his guys. He always took care of, like, he always paid for dinner. He always, like, bought everybody. Like, he just always was like, give. And it's like, that always stuck with me. And I'm glad that you brought that up, because I always know about the work hard and doing what you say you're going to do. But it's like that giving mentality of always, like, even with our family, like, he's always been the guy that, like, he'll take care of everybody. And he brings everybody down to the beach. He's that guy. And I always wondered, like, why is he able to do that and the rest of my family can't? Well, it's because he's an entrepreneur, and because he can create his own systems and he can create his own income, right? Because of that. And then, and I don't want to say it's unlimited, but I mean, like, for people growing up like I did, like, to me, it was like, he was like my rich uncle. You know what I mean? Like, he was like, it was a very, very cool experience. And I was like, I always craved that. I always wanted that. And for me, with my roofing company now, I get to I get to build it, and at the same time, I get to help people, which I think is like a blast, because there's not that many people in the roofing industry that are doing that. I know one of the guys that you're working for now, Joe Hoffman, and we'll talk about ROOFLE here in a second, but he's got that kind of cool thing where, like, he's running and CEO of a roofing company, and he's building this new tech platform to change the way that, homeowners and roofers can do business so that way we can stay competitive. Talk a little bit about your new position. Talk about the future of roofing.
Yeah. So, what a great segue into this, because my first time I started meeting with Joe, he was actually using another manufacturer, and my job was to try to convert him to use GAF. And as we started to get closer, trying to work business into it, but then it was pretty quickly that our lives were intersecting in a lot of different directions as well. He knows the foster care system and has had foster care kids and has adopted as well. So our story started intersecting, but going exactly from what you just said, he became so quickly. I don't even think he had started using GAF at that point. I just knew that he had a passion for contractors, and he didn't even care if they were in his backyard. So there were some times where I would call him up, and I knew that one of the first times that I ever really sat in a context of other contractors with him, he was talking about the process of when he was moving from 1099 to W-2 within his company. And so I knew that was a part of his story, and he was sharing that with a group of national guys from around the country. But I had a guy local right down the road from him, and who called me up and said, "Hey, I'm kind of really thinking that we need to change from 1099 to W-2." So I called Joe. I said, "Hey, would you mind talking to this guy?" No problem. Sits down. We sit down, and I think we were hours sitting there. What went well? What didn't go well? Why it's important? Who to talk to? And Joe sat and talked to his competitor from a few miles down the road. And Joe has always been that guy that says, rising tide lifts all ships, and he has been committed to that for as long as I've known him. So when ROOFLE came along, I could see where he was going and what was happening. I was very excited to join his team, and I'm kind of second week in here, so I'm kind of brand new. So this might be honeymoon period, but I'm telling you, the culture that he has put together in that company, I have had an absolute blast, and I'm so excited to be in this and what we're bringing. And again, what is he doing? He's created a platform to give away. He wants to have the ability of every roofing contractor across the country to be able to embed into their website the ability for a homeowner to come in and get an estimate immediately on their website. Basically, online shopping, e-commerce to the roofing space, and he started to. He piloted for about 2.5 years as his own company, and then said, "Nope, we're done. We're giving it away. Everybody needs to have this ability to do this," and so that's what we're doing now.
That's cool. I got to meet Joe out in Denver. We were at a conference together, and it was fun because that was the first time I actually, this summer when I started doing more stuff in the national industry, I never knew who a bunch of these people were, and I got to meet Joe Hoffman. He was a special human, and when I heard that, and I heard, and everyone around, that knows him, it would tell me the same type of stories that he would help other local contractors. And it's funny because in Pittsburgh, I've done that, and I didn't even know that I was doing it. I'm just I don't know. Sometimes people will call me dumb. If somebody asks for help, I'm just gonna help them. I don't even know. I'm not doing it for any specific reason. Somebody says, "Hey, how do you do this?" Because I did marketing a little bit differently. I think on a lot of roofers, and and then I would start seeing stuff go up. People would ask me questions. I have sales training now. This is a bold move, right? I host a sales training for my guys. And because I this is a little self-serving, but because I want to run out a cool facility, and because I want to have the best food and stuff, I'll open it up to the public, and I'll charge a little bit of money for the other people to come, so that way I can help pay for my guys to have a good time. And we teach them all sales, the same exact system that I learn. We teach open to the public, and I tell you this, it's actually helped my business even more because I broadcast it, I tell everyone. I'm excited about it. And here's the thing, when people are struggling, they reach out, they're going to come and we're going to have open arms for them to come and join forces with us. If ever the need comes to they don't want to do accounting anymore. They don't want to do marketing anymore. If they just want to do sales or operations, if they're a roofer and they just want to join an amazing team, Big Fish is here for you. If you're a salesperson and you want to come join a winning organization, Big Fish is here for you. And again, I love that mentality. I want to meet every other Joe Hoffman out there in the country. So if you find more Joe Hoffmans, and I know he's unique, but if you find guys that are like him, I want to meet all of them.
They're out there.
Yeah, no, there's probably one in every. There's one in every. Oh yeah, Paul Reed. He does his own. He does commercial roof training in his own market.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, because at the end of the day, when you can become your true self, roofing, I don't care if I sell another roof the rest of my life. If I have the opportunity to help people, get what they want, you know what I mean? That's the ultimate, that's the ultimate burning, it's it makes me feel good, right? That's my currency now. I don't care about, how much revenue I do and how many squares I do. And, when people ask, it's I don't even want to tell them. It's that gets in the way, man. What do you need help with?
There's no downside, is there? There's no downside at that point.
Yeah, I mean, hey, we're all living our best life, and I feel and that's one cool thing about the roofing industry that I've been hearing that a lot of other industries aren't like that. There's a lot of people helping each other in the roofing industry. I don't know if that's because we're a bunch of misfits that ended up here by accident, or actually I think it's on purpose. We might think it was on accident, but God had a purpose, right? And it's really special what's happening, man. So I appreciate you and everything that you're doing. And if there's anything I can help you with, I'm still testing out the software. So if any of my competitors are listening right now, go ahead and go to roofle.com, sign up. It's definitely, it's just been out since September 1st. So, I mean, it's pretty new.
Pretty new.
5 years from now, everybody will have it. But, we all know the early adopters take a little, they get on board, and then, everybody will come. And by the time everybody gets on board, there'll be something new out. Joe will be inventing something new. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, this is all you're seeing is you're witnessing one of many steps coming up. And, so we're going to see a lot of transparency coming up in our industry, which I think is going to be very good. I think it's. I
can't wait, man, because it'll help the guys that are doing it the right way. That's for sure.
Yeah, it absolutely will, and I think it'll drown out the guys that are not.
Right.
So people are going to go online. They're going to have instant access to the best contractors in town, and But going back to what you do, the ability to brand, the ability to get your name out there, to separate yourself, to cater yourself to those homeowners that are doing the homework and really searching beyond just the surface level stuff. It's as much sales as sitting at the dining room table and talking to somebody. And because people don't, it's getting to that time of the culture that people don't want to do that anymore.
Yeah, I know, but I still do worry about it becoming a commodity, though, when we're just going to flash them a price real quick, So, I'm still I'm still testing, and I'm still trying to figure out what customers really want, because it does send confusing messages, I don't know. So I'm still working through all that. So I'm going to be
so I got to tell you one quick story on that, because that is the biggest concern. It is a big concern. When they were piloting this, again, they were piloting this for about 2.5 years before they ever rolled it out. They had everything dialed in so tight, and they knew they had to be a little bit cheaper to get the hooks in, They found out they actually had to continue to raise their price because they were too cheap, because people still do not, it's going to automatically stop being a race to the bottom just because they actually had to continue to raise their price because their close rate had actually dipped because they were too cheap. Suddenly people were thinking they were, shopping at the consignment store instead of a name brand.
They were going to Walmart instead of Whole Foods.
Exactly. Well, see, I was going to stay away from name brands, but you can go ahead and go there if you want.
Yeah, well, I'm allowed to. It's
but
my
that's
show.
Exactly right.
It's my show, and Walmart or Whole Foods ain't paying me, so it's
yeah. And I mean, you look at the car market right now. There's no sense of race to the bottom, and that entire industry has switched to an online marketplace, and it has not been a.
No, I'm paying full sticker. I'm paying $5,000 over sticker for every truck that I even want, man. It's
exactly.
One day I spent, this is how you grow up one day. When you're at the dealership and you buy 3 trucks and your total's $205,000 and you're walking out 41-year-old kid that has no business. I remember the story when you said about your kid going to buy a car. I remember I tried to borrow $2,000 off my grandpa so I could buy a brand new Mustang. And he looked at me and said, if you got to borrow money from me, you can't afford it. And I said, I know, but I really want it, Grandpa. I really want it. And I'm like walking in the dealership signing paperwork for $200,000 worth of trucks. I'm like, wow, man, that's like a wake up call.
Yeah.
It's a lot of responsibility.
Yeah. And it's if I think at the end of my life, whether it's having to do with roofing or e-commerce or buying trucks or having kids or foster care, I think the end of my life is going to be it's everything's unplanned. Everything that I think is going to happen, it's just probably going to go the opposite. Right down to 3 years ago, I was 45 years old. I got to meet my mom for the first time. I had long since given up that dream to be able to do that, and then meeting 5 half sisters. 3 on her side and 2 on my dad's side, and wow. The amount of stuff in my life that's unplanned, and I know I could see it in your eyes too. How much did you plan on being here in your shoes right now? It just doesn't happen. But the way that, that unplanned is actually God's plan. And I've been so blessed to be able to live the life that I have and have the experiences that I have and walk with the people that I get to walk with my wife, with people like Joe, even the time that at GAF, I have no regrets. There's no plan to get me to where I am today. And it's humbling to sit here and have this conversation with you and be able to think back and kind of tell some stories and go there every once in a while.
Well, I feel like I missed a question early on halfway through the podcast. I should have asked you if you ever met your birth mother. That's impressive. So tell me, I got to ask a couple more follow-up questions. So
yeah.
How did you find her? Okay. Cause I'm thinking if I'm a listener at home, I'm like, how did I miss that part? All right. How did you find her? And how often do you stay in touch with her? And what was that feeling like?
Oh man, it was the coolest thing. So, my wife had, because we had long since, again, the closed adoption is a real thing and from the 70s. So I had long since kind of given up the hope of that stuff, but, my wife had given me a 23andMe test, and it was more to just say, what is it? Cause there's some weird things about me. If you look closely, I've been growing out my beard for like 2 weeks now. I don't grow facial hair. It just doesn't happen.
If you're watching on YouTube, you can definitely tell he doesn't have any facial hair. So if you're listening on Apple and Spotify, the guy is like cleaner than a 12-year-old boy.
So I can do Movember, and you'll start seeing something right about February. So there were some things that I wanted to know the nationality. Well, what is the DNA in me, and I did that. And about 2 years later, after doing that, I got an email, and my wife actually got it because she does all this stuff.
She's organized.
She says, yeah, right. And she got this email. She called me, and I happened to be at a convention in Las Vegas, and she said, this 23andMe, they said they've identified a paternal aunt. That's pretty close. And I'm like, yeah, that's really close. And I mean, one ear and out the other, right? And it had to be about a month or a month and a half later, and I'd had a hard day, and I got home, and for whatever reason, I'm like, you said you had an email or something, right? Yep. So I looked in there, and the person that had filled it out and had identified as my paternal aunt had her name and everything in there. So from that moment of me opening up that email, doing a quick Google search, and then looking on Facebook, it was within 15 minutes, I had my family tree on my dad's side. Wow. It took me about another week because there was still a link that needed to be made to my mom's side. My dad did pass away shortly before, a couple years before I was able to find that. But I was connected with my 2 sisters on my dad's side that night, talked to them. Like, it was surreal. It was just one of the most emotional moments of my life. And then about a week later, got a hold of, and I talked to my youngest sister, who, funny enough, lived about 15 minutes away from me. Like, this was all in Iowa. This is Dubuque, Iowa.
Did you guys go to the same high school?
We didn't, no. So this was all Dubuque, Iowa, that they were mostly raised, and then my mom's.
Did they was the siblings raised by the real parent, or did they give for adoption? Sorry.
No, so you had a couple of high school kids that got pregnant, right? Mm-hmm. They split up pretty much right away. I went off and grew up on a farm in Iowa. They both went and married other people, and they both had daughters. My dad had 2 daughters, my half sisters, and my mom had 3 daughters, my other half sisters.
And they raised those kids. They each raised those kids.
And they, yep, they all raised them.
Right.
And yeah,
that's wild. And
but one of my sisters moved to Coon Rapids, Minnesota, which is about 15 minutes to where I live today, and we probably saw her a dozen times over 15 years, 10 or 15 years at Costco, at the local Costco. I mean, we just...
Yeah, you had to run into them, right?
But had no idea who we were. So getting connected and getting to know them, and it's been just a tremendous blessing. And having my mom, this was the coolest part. And you might have seen a very short snippet of when I actually met my mom for the first time. It was in my own house. So she walked into my own house. I got to give her a big hug and say, "Thank you. Look at the story that you started, the chapter that you wrote, 45 years ago. This is me now." So, my biological mom, who had a decision to make, I don't know if she was a junior or a senior in high school, who got pregnant, who had no intention of marrying the guy that she was, got pregnant by. Gave me a life and gave me every single story that I told you today. Started with my biological mom 45 years ago, and I got to thank her for that inside of my own house. It was
for that to be the first interaction that she had, and I'm thinking about this. I'm thinking like she probably lived her whole life feeling some type of guilt and shame, and for you to have the maturity and the foresight, right, because of your whole life and what you have done. To be able to go there and comfort her and to make her feel okay instantly. Oh man, that's good stuff, Mike Goldenstein. That's good stuff, man. You are a special human being. I'm glad to start becoming Facebook friends with you at least. I'm coming to Minneapolis on November. We're recording this show October or something at the end of the month. I don't know when this is going to air, but I'm coming to Minneapolis November 16th. I'm doing a YouTube podcast with our buddy Dimitri. And
look me up.
And I will definitely look you up, man. I want to at least do lunch with you or dinner or something before I fly home. I'm only coming in for the day. There's 5 questions that I always ask every podcast guest. You ready for them?
I'm ready.
All right, you got to go on an island completely by yourself, right? By yourself forever. And there's no one else on the planet left, right? And it's just you. What book are you going to take with you?
Well, my favorite book has always been How to Win Friends and Influence People. I've loved that book. I don't know what I'm going to do with it on an island all by myself, but
that's what I'm saying. Yeah. All right. So
right.
What movie would you take with you?
Big Fish. I'm not saying that in any way.
Are you being for real? I've never actually even seen the movie. How about that? So I know there's a play, and I knew there's a movie, but I've never actually seen it.
It's one of my favorite movies ever.
So there was one of the high schools was doing a musical or a play or whatever called Big Fish, and then which was great for advertising, even though obviously it's a different logo and stuff like that. But there would be all these Big Fish yard signs in the whole school district promoting this play. I was like, yeah, free advertising.
Yeah.
All right, so cool. That's book. We did movie. Let's see what else. Restaurant. So you can put a restaurant on the island because you got to eat, man. What restaurant you putting on there?
Okay, Chipotle, my favorite, absolutely bar none, love it. Haven't had a good experience there since pre-COVID, but I have faith in you. Chipotle, you can get your act together. You're hired. You're on my island.
And then the 4th question is, you're allowed to take one trip. Okay, you can go anywhere in the world for a week. Where are you going?
Hawaii, and I don't know why, because I think I'm going to hate it there. But I've never been there. I've always wanted to go there, and I don't know, but. Yeah. All right.
So that's cool. Well, you can go there. And then the last question is, you can spend 24 hours with one person, past, present, dead, not dead, famous, not famous. Who do you pick?
Brad Paisley. The dude just fascinates me. I think I would be in pain laughing so hard after about 10 minutes, and I would absolutely.
And you just want to spend the whole day with him.
I think so.
All right.
I think so.
Man.
Crazy talented, very funny. I'll probably again.
Listen, I appreciate it, that's my answer. I appreciate you being on the show, man. This has been great. How can people get in touch with you? Facebook, Instagram, email. What do you want to give them?
Yeah, Facebook, Instagram, email's very easy. mikeg@roofle.com. But yeah, reach out. Would love to talk. You'll see me all over the place.
And if you guys got value out of this podcast, please go ahead and like, subscribe, give us a comment. Tell us what you liked about this. And I'll make sure Mike comments back and forth. If you have any questions on adoption, I'm sure, or foster care, I'm sure Mike would love to be able to talk to you that as well. Until next week, we'll see you on another edition of the Big Fish Cares podcast. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for listening to the Big Fish Cares podcast.